For me, there are two types of people who buy a 911 Turbo. There's the super rich who just want the most expensive of everything. Personalised monogram, tick. Leather wrapped ashtray, tick, even if you don't smoke. To be honest, they're likely to buy the Cabriolet. But then there's another group of people who just want the ultimate tool. At over $200,000, this Turbo S costs more than a McLaren 570S, but it's so much more discreet. For most passers-by, this is just another 911, and Porsche's built over 1 million of those. It doesn't even have the presence of a 911 GT3 or any of the other winged wonders which tell the world you're a proper racing driver. No, this is just a 640 horsepower machine. To coin that old cliche, it's a everyday supercar. Now, if you're wondering why it's just me chatting to a camera and there's no arty pictures of grass sort of whistling in the wind as the car whizzes past, well, that's because Edmunds has made the correct decision to cancel all shoots involving more than one person. So it's just me talking to you. We do indeed live in strange times. The shots that you can see are actually taken by Porsche up the road in Monterey, Northern California, but we thought we'd include them because it looks nice and at least shows you what the car looks like. So if the picture here looks out of sync with the picture there, well, you know, get over it. For now at least, every version of the current 911, codenamed 992, is turbocharged, even the entry-level Carrera. But this is a turbo with a capital T and it belongs to a special lineage. The original 911 Turbo was launched at the Paris Auto Show back in 1974, but it didn't arrive in the US until 1976, when it had the mighty figure of, wait for it, 236 horsepower. To be honest, in my opinion, it wasn't until the 996 Turbo of 2000 that the Turbo was actually better than the standard Carrera. That 996 had 415 horsepower. Now, the standard Carrera S has more than that today, so for the Turbo with a capital T, Porsche had to make a big jump, and they have, to 640 horsepower. It uses a 3.8 litre version of the 3 litre 6-cylinder found in the standard 911, but with two bigger turbos, it now generates 60 horsepower more than the outgoing 991 Turbo, and 37 pounds-feet more torque at 590. Handling all that performance is an all-wheel drive system that's again been updated, and an 8-speed flappy paddle PDK gearbox. Now, the Edmunds test track is rightly closed at the moment, so we haven't had the opportunity to independently verify Porsche's figures, but we do know for experience that the Stuttgart boffins tend to be pretty conservative. So when they say it'll do 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, a quarter mile in 10.5 and in 205 miles an hour, we do tend to believe them. To be honest, we normally expect to beat Porsche's figures. Now, in my career, I've been lucky enough to drive most supercars and quite a few race cars as well, and on paper at least, there are a few that are as quick as this. But, and it sounds strange to say, it doesn't always feel it. In a McLaren or something like an Audi R8 or even a GT3, you have such a visceral experience. It's so loud, so energetic, that you're always conscious that you're in something special. This is a little bit different. Even with the $3,500 sports exhaust that's fitted to this car and is switched on at the moment, it's never noisy. And because it doesn't rev so hard, the rev line is 7,000 RPM instead of 9,000 like it is in a GT3. You sort of drive it on the torque, almost like you would a diesel. So it gathers speed almost by stealth. You just get this sonorous cry and this giant wallop of torque, and suddenly you're going a hell of a lot faster than you ever realized. It's sort of a different kind of performance, and but it still goes. And the days are gone when turbocharging gave you all this sort of lag and a poor throttle response. Yes, it's not quite as whip crack as a GT3 is, which is naturally aspirated, but it's still pretty damn good. The only thing I miss that you used to get is that lovely little psst, then when you lift off the throttle and you get that wastegate that releases all the gases. In this car, it's electronically controlled and it's much more refined, it's a lot much more sensible, but I miss that little kind of that you used to get in turbos of old. Maybe Porsche could kind of re-engineer it back in, you can push a button and have all that joy reinstated. There is a big elephant in the room with this car, and it comes also from Weissach in the form of the Taycan Turbo S. Now that car has 750 horsepower. It hits 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, which is exactly the same as Porsche claims for this. And on the quarter mile, it's only 0.3 of a second behind. Now the Taycan Turbo S is, of course, electric, which makes it a very different proposition. But it is cheaper, and it will seat 4, and it is just as fast. And part of me says this car, high-tech and magnificent though it is, does feel like something from yesterday. It's strange, when I tested the Taycan, I kind of came to the conclusion that I'd rather have a Taycan than a 911. Then you come out here on a road like this and you drive the 911 Turbo and your brain shifts again and you think, well, actually, I'll stick with the gasoline for a bit and then switch to electric. To be honest, it's a tough choice, but then there are plenty of owners in this price bracket who maybe could afford both, and yeah, that would suit me. Taycan Turbo S for the week, and for the family, 911 Turbo for the weekend. But then again, if I was buying a weekend car, surely you'd have the GT3. If only. The other reason I'm torn between Taycan and 911 is, although the Taycan's undeniably great to drive, this is a different experience. And I'm lucky enough to own the last of the air-cooled 911s, the 993, and you can feel the lineage in this car, and so much of that comes from where the engine sits, the shape, the driving position, and the basic sensations. It still feels like a 911. It still feels that agility, that almost unique experience. The steering is terrific. It's very pointy, but there's plenty of response, and he puts the power down with an aplomb that something with this much horsepower really shouldn't be capable of. As you'd expect from a 911, there's a little drive mode here on the steering wheel, which takes you from normal to sport plus, which is pretty much full nutter mode. But what I like is that you've still got a switch on the center console here, so you can have the engine and the transmission and everything else in nutty sporty mode, but then detune the damping to give you a bit more compliance. On a road like this, that's critical. To be honest, most of the time, if you're pushing on, you might be in Sport Plus, but then soften the damping, and there's also an individual mode that allows you to set everything up yourself. There is so much technology going on in this car. There's active aerodynamics thanks to that rather splendid rear wing and another little splitter at the front that balances it all out. There's rear wheel steering, there's carbon ceramic brakes, there's a super sophisticated all-wheel drive system that can now throw more torque to the front than ever before. There's the flappy paddle gearbox, there's electronic damping. I could kind of go on, and all this tech is designed to make something with so much inherent performance accessible to people who don't have God-given ability, who, dare I say it, have more money than talent. It's amazing, to be honest, just how much kind of finesse and attention to detail this is. And it must be strange as an engineer, because so much of it will go A, completely unnoticed by the average owner, and B, completely unused in normal road conditions like these. At the end of the day, who cares that it develops 15% more downforce than the last one? It's almost engineering for engineering's sake, but the geek in me loves that. There's even something called a wet mode. Now, the traditional way of measuring rain in a car is to use sensors on the windshield, but Porsche wasn't happy with that, because that only tells you when it's raining, not when it's wet on the road. So they're using acoustic sensors in the wheel arches. If they detect that it's been raining, they'll change everything from the ABS, the stability control, to the aerodynamics, all to help the driver and keep the car on the road. Now, that's commendable. It's a fantastic safety feature. But consider this: if you've just spent over $200,000 on a supercar, and you need acoustic sensors to tell you that there's water on the road, and maybe you should consider your life choices. So what don't I like? Well, this car's riding on the optional sport suspension, which is about $1,500. It lowers the whole car by 10mm, which is about 0.4 of an inch. Now, I haven't driven the car on the non-sport suspension, but I have a bit of a hunch that this setup works fine in Germany, where the roads are terrific, but here in the US, sometimes it just feels a bit overdamped. The whole thing's a little bit too aggressive, particularly on the highway. And I suspect when we come to driving, we might actually prefer the standard suspension, especially in the 911 Turbo. A firm ride's fine for a GT3 because that's the point of the car. It's supposed to feel like a road racer, but this is more of a grand tourer, and me at least, I prefer something a bit more cosseting. Two other things I don't like, well, tyre roar is a problem on the standard 992, and it is again here in the Turbo. Particularly on the highway, you get so much drone from the rubber that it can become slightly irritating after a while. And the other thing is just the size of this car. 911s used to be super small, and that was always part of their appeal. But compared to my 993 version, this car is now 6.5 inches wider. And now Porsche says that's to improve stability, and it means that you can fit bigger tyres and blah, 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 blah. And all of that from an engineering perspective is true, but when you're driving it on a road like this, it now feels big. You feel the width. The reality is that most of the time this car will exist as pretty much a normal 911, and that's kind of the point of the Turbo. This interior is really, well, just a posher version of the normal Carrera S. Pretty much everything you see is wrapped in dead cow, which is certainly going to offend the editor of this film, Johnny, who's very much a dedicated vegan. He won't even like my hoodie, to be honest. Sorry, Johnny. There are a few turbo-specific details. You get a nice little Turbo S script on the century-mounted rev counter, and this kind of stripy stitching, which harks back to the original 930 Turbo. Kind of like that. There's also a bit more kit for your money. These electric sport seats are some of the finest that my derriere has ever sat on, and it's great that you get the Bose sound system as standard, because the one in the normal 911 is, to be honest, pretty rubbish. So what don't I like? Well, to be honest, criticisms are the same as they were for the Carrera S. I still don't like this touchscreen infotainment system. It's a bit too fiddly for my taste, particularly when you're on the move. You're always pushing the wrong function. I still don't like this fiddly little gear stick. Oh, and one other thing, my water bottle doesn't fit in the cup holder. Hashtag first world problems. This 911 Turbo also isn't as practical as the Taycan, which seats 4 and has more trunk capacity, but compared with pretty much any other supercar, it's still a really practical, everyday proposition. The rear seats are just about big enough for children, and there's a decent trunk in the front, which has swallowed all my gear today. So objectively, is this twice as good a car as a standard Carrera? Well, the answer to that is obviously no. But given that the average turbo buyer has an annual income in excess of $1 million, maybe thinking about things in conventional terms isn't appropriate. Think about the Turbo S as the ultimate everyday 911 for those who can afford one. If it was me, I'd choose a Turbo S in silver with a black interior. Nice and subtle, nice and discreet, nice and demure. I'd slip through the crowd unnoticed, safe in the knowledge that my supercar, in terms of pure performance, in just about every condition, is untouchable.